So much violence around me. It's so much violence they want me to remain silent. But I can't. I'm here at a TED Talk. But due to dead talk, I represent those that don't have no voice. They don't have no choice. They walking around these streets, they scared of the police. The violence is a disease that's inside you and me. And I just want you to understand. I want you to understand that every day we are walking around infected by a disease called violence. And you say, how? And how is because we grow up in a society. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, where a lot of my friends died in a crack epidemic or went to jail for football numbers. Their families, their wives, their children were destroyed. They didn't know where to go. They were full of anger and fear. And I watched these children with an empty face, living in a shell. And then my own tragedy of my father dying in the Vietnam War. Although they came and gave my mother his Purple Heart, they didn't realize how much they tore our family apart. And this is what happens to all of us in this war-driven society. It's a war overseas, and it's a war in our streets. And it's impossible for us to remain silent. So I created an organization at that time called the Code Foundation with our brother Tupac Shakur to give these young people an alternative to the cycle of violence that we was growing up in so that we can change their worldview. And I would go out and I would get these young people and I would pile them up in my car and take them around and just expose them to something different from the pain and the tragedies that was going on in our communities. But I knew that wasn't enough. So I got together with some other brothers and sisters and professors, and we created what is now known as the Violence Intervention and Prevention System. And we took this system to the New York City Council and the mayor. And at first, it wasn't accepted, and that's probably because of the way that I brought it, because at that time, I knew everything. Some of us may experience that at different points in time. And it was the jealousy and the judgment and the arrogance that was inside of me that would force me to kick down doors when it was open and kill the people on the other side who had the ability to help me. And I had to look at the way I was moving. And I had to slow down. And I had to breathe. And I had to think that everything you do, Erica, doesn't have to be a confrontation. And that although that I'm not going to agree with everyone around everything, that my communication had to lead to the outcome fulfilling the vision and mission that I was trying to accomplish. So as I grew in my own self, I grew in my ability to accomplish what it is I was trying to do. So we got the city to listen to us. And right now, our system was adopted by New York City, and it's called the Crisis Management System in partnership with the foundation of the Cure Violence System that came out of Chicago. And what we added was something called unconventional therapeutic services. Because these young people who I talked about, who grew up with their fathers going to jail for football numbers or being killed in a crack epidemic, experience a trauma that most of us could not understand. And this trauma caused them to do things and live a way that destroyed a lot of their lives. One young man, I had the privilege of Wednesday waking up to around 8 to 10 police officers banging on my door, shining lights in my window. And I'm like, what is going on? And I hear a voice in my house. And I'm like, who is that? And they're like, the police. And I'm like, the police? They're like, parole. I'm like, nobody is in this house is on parole. And I go downstairs and they're looking for one of the young men who used to be in our program. Because as most people do run these programs, we let these young people stay in our house. But what did this young man do? When he was 14 or 15, he stole a cell phone. And now we're here 10 years later and he's still on parole. And the violence, because this young man's father was one of those that went to jail for football numbers. And his mother was one of those who was impacted by the trauma of that relationship of having her child, her father, taken away. And see, these things happen all the time in our community. And he's just one example. And the police coming to my house is one example of how the violence continues. So when we talk about unconventional therapeutic services, it helps us heal. And it helps communities heal. And when we talk about hiring credible messengers, we're hiring these brothers and sisters who went to jail for 20 and 30 years. And to us who are the professionals who need to resolve the problems in our community. But these brothers and sisters need help too. And so we work with them to not only let go of some of the pain that they suffered through that process of prison and through the process of their own childhood, but we provide with these young people an out. We interrupted over 4,286 incidents of violence collectively in New York City with the crisis management system, which means that 8,400 young people would not have been killed or gone to jail, which means that over 16,000 families will not be infected by this disease called violence. And so we understand that this issue of violence intervention and prevention is something that all of us are responsible to do. And you can only do it from a place of healing. So that's why for me, I had to go back and look at the judgment and look at the jealousy and look at the anger and look at the envy and look at the things that caused me as a peacemaker to not really engage compassionately with the people who I was serving or even myself. And that is something that we all need to do as we walk in this journey called life. It is very important for us to stop. It is very important for us to breathe. It is very important to let go of the things that infected us as children, as adults. It is very important for us to realize that as an angry peacemaker, you can't make peace. And that only from a place of compassion can you win over someone's life. So in New York City, at our organization, Life Camp, in an area where previously there was 4 people killed a year or 17 shot a year, we had 569 days of no one being shot and no one being killed. In an area where no one went and got therapeutic services because no one believes that we need therapeutic services, we now had a community of young brothers and sisters who was carrying guns and who were high-risk shooters going to get therapy and healing themselves from the pain that caused them to pick up the gun. And now they were shooting videos and documentaries instead of shooting people. They were putting their pain on beats and transforming other people's lives instead of taking their own lives. And we created a concept called Peace Week. And during Peace Week, we would, as a city, we promoted as a city, we would just stop and reflect and take time to do self-responsibility for making peace a lifestyle. And after 5 years, now Peace Week is institutionalized in the New York City calendar. And see, we do these things from a place of compassion now instead of a place of anger. And it's very important for us to collectively engage in our work. So now there's 18 sites in New York City. Through our partnership with New York City Council and the mayor's office, and they put over $12 million in this collective program throughout the city. And our partner organizations in East New York and in the Bronx also had 365 days with no shootings in New York City. So as I get ready to walk on stage, I want everyone to join me in saying goodbye to jealousy, in saying goodbye to judgment, in saying goodbye to envy, and all of those things that live inside of you that stop you from really living. Because one of the things that I know is to live doesn't mean you're alive. Peace.